A24, a company that has solidified themselves of being in the culture as somewhat of an indie company, if you were to ask the common man, that is. But at a closer glance, you'll quickly realize that in current year, they're like any other movie company that distributes movies. The only difference is that A24 is still in its infancy. Maybe at the very beginning, they were an actual indie company, but they've become much more lately, and in keeping in that tradition, they tend to always distribute movies that follow a similar style of what the films under the studio has become known for, and that proceeds to stay the same with the movie we're going to be talking about today. The drama is a black comedy romance drama directed by Kristoffer Borgli. It stars Robert Pattinson, Zendaya, Alana Haim, and a couple of others. The plot follows a happily engaged couple who is put to the test when an unexpected turn sends their wedding week off the rails. I've been pretty excited for this movie following its announcement. There was a lot of secrecy around the main plot of the movie, which that alone was a pretty fun gimmick for the movie. But unfortunately, there's been a lot of things happening that threatened the perception of this movie before it was set to release, as the plot twist of the movie was revealed, which supposedly had been leaked due to jealousy over Zendaya not promoting Euphoria, as she has a lot of movies coming out this year, so why would she want to promote that shitty TV show? But maybe all this controversy is what's driving people to go see the movie. It could actually be for its lead, which definitely makes a lot more sense. But with that all being said, what did I think about it? I'm going to start by talking about the performances, leading with Robert Pattinson, who's known for roles in movies like Good Time and The Lighthouse. I genuinely think Robert Pattinson is one of the best working actors today, and it's looking like he's about to have an insanely impressive run of movies from this year alone, and this movie is no exception, as I thought he did a really good job here. Throughout the movie, Pattinson does a good job at portraying this constant high level of paranoia and is constantly on edge over the course of the runtime, which shows on his face really well. There's brief moments where he really breaks down here and does it incredibly convincingly, while finding a way to make it slightly humorous. In fact, he does have a pretty great humorous moments throughout, which is done mainly through the way he can bulge his eyes and exaggerate his facial expressions, along with line readings that made him pretty endearing, while at the same time constantly betraying his character but to be pretty pathetic and silently manipulative throughout the movie. I don't think it's his absolute best, but it's certainly such a memorable and entertaining performance. Zendaya stars alongside Pattinson in this movie too. Zendaya is known for starring in movies like Dune and Challengers. For me, her performance in this movie could be a close second to this being one of her best, maybe only slightly behind her performance in Challengers. There are so many great moments in this where she's able to expertly show guilt on her face, even managing to handle the idea of building up the feeling of guilt. You know, that rising feeling mainly in your chest and throat when you're getting severe negative reaction. Well, she conveys this honestly pretty realistically, and it's super impressive. Apart from this, there's points where she has to handle a lot of emotional scenes realistically, to the point where you feel a great deal of sympathy for a character, which gets elevated through how fully layered of a performance this is. Every time she smiles, there's a hint of pain in her eyes, and throughout the course of the runtime, there's so much desperation in her voice that tends to get pretty heartbreaking. Alana Haim is in this movie too. Haim is known for her roles in movies like Licorice Pizza and The Mastermind. It's a massive shame that I had to learn Haim is a Zionist, as I really enjoyed her performance in this movie for how truly awful her character is. This isn't a criticism on the writing or moments of her performance. The way the actual character acts in this movie is just awful, horrible, and annoyingly bitchy, not to mention incredibly entitled. It's the human embodiment of combining every single Twitter user into a single person. That would be her character. From the moment she's introduced, you get a sense from the way she speaks that she has a problem with everything. Haim does a good job at snapping at her co-stars so quickly, and to bring up this level of victim blaming is done in such a painfully realistic way. There are certain things Haim does especially well with her eyes that are able to convey deep hatred in a way I think I've rarely seen lately. Haim's character is part of another couple in this movie too, and the other half of that couple is played by Mamoudou Athie, who's known for his roles in movies like Elemental and Kinds of Kindness. While he doesn't get an abundance of screen time, I still think he did a pretty good job in his role. He's mainly one of the comedic reliefs here, as a lot of his line readings tend to be pretty funny, and at the same time he does well at conveying suspicion and a level of paranoia through his facial expressions throughout the movie. I feel like if I want to talk about the plot and a lot of the major themes themes of this movie, I'll literally have to get into spoilers, even if certain plot points had been spoiled to the general public. But if after all this time you've managed to go into this blind and still intend on going in blind, it's probably best that you save this video into your watch later playlist, go check the movie out, and on the way home come right back to this moment in the video to hear some dipshit talk about the movie on the internet. You done all that? Good. A major part that had people interested in this movie is the scene where the two couples are talking about the worst thing that they've ever done, and once it gets to Zendaya and we only get everyone's reaction, we don't hear what's said. It's revealed in the actual movie that when she was younger she had planned a school shooting and didn't go ahead with it. There's some small details that allude to this early on in the movie, like for example Zendaya's character being deaf in one ear, which is revealed from her testing out a gun when she was younger. This obviously leads to some very heavy subject matter in the movie, which made me a little worried for how it was going to be handled, but thankfully I don't think this is mishandled at all. I think there is a good blend of leaving room for serious moments while having such well done moments of pitch black humor. There's a photographer character played by Zoe Winters, and the reason I didn't bring her up in the acting section is mainly because she really only is in one scene, but it should be said that she has impeccable comedic timing in this scene where she's describing how the photos are going to work quickly to, I will mention, the sound design in this scene is especially really well done. I think the opening of this movie sets up the entire plot and overall themes really well. We see Robert Pattinson's character notice a book that Zendaya's character is reading. When she leaves, he proceeds to take a pic of it and briefly reads about it so that he can engage in a conversation with her about it, which is setting up to the audience that the movie will constantly just be full of lies throughout. However, in the same scene, there's a funny misunderstanding. This is when Zendaya's character reveals that she's deaf and makes Pattinson's character redo his pickup line, showing briefly here and at other points in the movie that our character believes in second chances. There's great choices in editing in this movie, as we see thoughts of paranoia played out in scenes that at first glance will make you yourself question what's really going on in the movie. One that stood out to me especially was when Robert Pattinson's character was imagining Zendaya's character at the age she said she was when she was planning the school shooting, which on one hand is a good way of portraying how people may perceive others for a certain event in their lives and only solely tying them to that event. However, this scene feels a little awkward considering certain things that have come out about the director lately. Moving on very quickly, I do think there's a lot of great points and scenes in this movie. I think one of the best and most humorous scenes come from a conversation between Pattinson's character and the other two characters in an office. Pattinson's character in the movie is British, like himself in real life, so he's able to provide an outsider view of how Americans seem to deal with gun culture every day and how it's new to him even after so long. Basically commentating on how people that live in a country full of something like that just becomes incredibly desensitized to the topic. This leads to such a well-written bit of Haim's character essentially racially stereotyping her own boyfriend, which further shows the hypocrisy of her character. The whole wedding sequence is a really well done execution of great tension and well written cringe comedy in vein of something like Happiness, where the scenarios and conversations that are coming out of the characters' mouths are genuinely so baffling and horrific that you pretty much can't help but laugh, almost as a coping mechanism. For this style of humor to be in a somewhat mainstream enough movie, it's honestly shockingly impressive to see. Next, I want to talk about the cinematography in this movie. The cinematography was done by Arseny Khachaturian, who did cinematography for Bones and All. I love the way this movie was shot. One thing that stood out to me was the decision to shoot the scenes which were meant to be taking place in the 2000s. All looked a bit saturated and had more harsh lighting in scenes in comparison to the rest of the movie, mainly in the home of Pattinson and Zendaya's character. The overall feeling is very flat and beige. Flat being something which tends to be a common complaint with people when it comes to films nowadays, but it works here. And what helps is that there's a good deal of really fun camera techniques which heighten the overall style of the movie. Certain things that are done in this movie are a bunch of very slow zoom ins and outs, which reminded me quite a bit of the type of cinematography you'd see in 70s cinema. There's a pretty great handheld push-in shot which kind of reminded me of something that you'd see in a PTA movie. It's only done once in the whole movie, but it was still really cool to see. A very common technique is handheld shots whenever there's tense moments throughout the movie, which really added to the style. Another aspect I want to talk about is is the music in this movie. The original score for this movie was composed by Daniel Pemberton, who's done music for movies like Project Hail Mary and the Spider-Verse movies. This is a pretty good score from the guy, relying on paranoia and scarred piano chords, which from time to time give off an anxious tone throughout the movie. Along with this score, there's a couple of licensed songs in the movie too, all of which I thought were pretty good, as there were times I thought the songs fit the atmosphere of what was going on, and even sometimes the lyrics helped the scenes that they were in too. It really heightened everything that was going on. But all that being said, I really liked this movie. I liked it a lot more than I thought I would. It's such a touchy subject to base a plot around, but on so many levels, I think it works. The commentary is strong and makes for really humorous moments. It's mainly pretty uncomfortable, and I think this works into the movie's favor. So you can imagine the crowd that shat on Marty Supreme for having an unlikable protagonist are gonna have a field day with this one. It's not offensive for the sake of it though. It's taking these topics and themes that it has something to say about things that I think are pretty prevalent even now, which I think is why it's important for people to see this movie. I'm giving the drama 4 stars. This movie is home to a lot of pretty great performances, led expertly with Pattinson and Zendaya at the helm of the whole thing. Its story is shrouded in misunderstandings and awkward situations that never fully let you in on what you think is really happening from time to time. There's a great emphasis on creating such an uncomfortable atmosphere throughout the runtime, which made it absolutely no surprise that Ari Aster acted as a producer on this. I mean, fork found in kitchen, eh? I guess some key to succession in wanting to make a hit indie is to make sure your leads are well known, as my cinema was almost fully packed. However, it should be important to note that if the people are well known, at least have people that can actually act, which thankfully this movie has. I'd be shocked if we see another movie made like this in the next while, and I especially don't know what's going to happen with Borgli with those allegations, but at least we got a solid movie that I think, like every movie, deserves to be watched on the big screen. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out already, and I guess if you don't mind going into a movie with full spoilers, then go to your local cinema as soon as you can to check this one out.